never once asked what she wanted in her whole life. A Lakota chief asked and waited for answer. The pipe was cold when I picked it up that morning. Not cold from the night, though the night had been cold enough, frost on the grass, the kind that crunches underfoot and lingers in shadow till mid-morning. Cold in the way a thing gets when it hasn't been touched in a long time. My father's pipe, carved from a single piece of red catlinite, the bowl shaped like a sitting bear, the stem wrapped in sinew that had gone brown and stiff at the joints. I don't know why I picked it up that particular morning. I'd looked at it plenty of times, sitting in the corner of my lodge on the folded piece of elk hide where I kept it, and walked past it. That morning I picked it up. I held it a while, feeling the weight of it in my palm, and then I set it down again and went to see about the horses. I am telling you all of this because you need to understand what kind of man I was before she came into it. Not what kind of chief, what kind of man, and the pipe tells you something true if you let it. My name is Charging Hawk. I have led my band of the Oglala Lakota for 14 years. I led them through the treaty years when we had to smile at men we did not trust, through the hunger years when the game pulled back and the agency beef was stringy and late, through the year we lost 11 people in 2 months to a sickness that came from the east like everything else that ruined us. I had 3 wives. All 3 are gone now, 2 from the sickness, 1 who went back to her family after our son died. I'm not asking you to feel sorry about that. I'm telling you so you understand the arithmetic of the thing. By the time Margaret Linden came to our camp with a broken wheel axle, a mule that was lame on the left foreleg, and a load of medical supplies she was trying to get to the agency 30 miles south, I had been alone for 4 years. Not lonely, I would have said then. Alone. There's a difference. I knew it once. I was not sure I still knew it the morning she drove her wagon through our camp. She did not look frightened. That was the first thing I noticed. Most white women I had encountered in those years looked frightened. Not always at us specifically. Some of them were frightened of the wind, the space, the absence of the things they'd grown up with. But there was a particular fear that crossed the face of a white woman when she found herself in the middle of a Lakota camp, surrounded by people who did not look like her and who spoke a language she did not know. I had seen it enough times to stop counting. Margaret Linden did not look frightened. She looked annoyed. She was standing on the wagon seat, one hand on the reins of her mule, who was standing badly, favoring the bad leg, and she was looking at the axle the way a man looks at a tool that has failed him at the worst possible moment. Her jaw was set. Her hair had come half out of its pins and she hadn't bothered to fix it. There was dust on her collar and a dark stain on her cuff that I found out later was iodine. She was maybe 35, though she looked like a woman who had been treated as older for most of her adult life, which does something to a person's face. Not hardens it exactly, steadies it. My second in command, a man named Yellow Fox, came to me and said in Lakota that there was a white woman with a broken wagon and what did I want to do about her. I said I'd go look at it myself. Yellow Fox gave me the look he sometimes gives me, which means he is deciding not to say the thing he is thinking. I have known him since we were boys. His looks speak clearly. I walked over to the wagon. She turned and looked at me the way she'd looked at the axle, assessing, not afraid, deciding what to do about the problem in front of her. I said in English that it looked like her axle had split at the collar. She said yes, she could see that. I said her mule was also lame. She said she knew that too. I asked where she was headed. She told me. She said she had medical supplies in the wagon that were needed at the agency, and that she was behind her schedule by a day already, and that she would be grateful for whatever assistance I was willing to offer. And then she stopped and looked at me with those steady gray eyes and waited. She did not add anything to soften it. No excessive thank you in advance. No nervous chatter. She said what the situation was and what she needed, and she waited. I stood there a moment. I don't know that I can explain what it was in those few seconds. I was a man who spent most of his days being asked things, asked to decide, asked to lead, asked to intercede, asked to judge. And I was a man who, in his personal life, had mostly told women what they were going to do rather than ask them. Not cruelly. That was simply the shape of things, in the world I grew up in and the world I had always moved through. And here was this woman who had just told me clearly what she needed, and then closed her mouth and waited for me to answer. I found I respected it immediately. I told her we would fix the axle. I told her we had a man who was skilled with wagon repairs. I told her the mule needed at least a day's rest and poulticing before it could pull again. I told her she was welcome to stay in our camp for that time, and that she would not be bothered, and that she could keep her supplies in her wagon. She looked at me for a moment, then she said, "Thank you, that's fair." Not effusive, not overwhelmed with relief, just, "That's fair," like we had negotiated something between equals and both come away with what we needed. I walked back to Yellow Fox, who was watching me with that look again. He said in Lakota that she was an unusual woman. I said yes. He said I was looking at her. I said I was looking at the wagon. He said nothing, which meant he did not believe me. She stayed 3 days. The axle repair took the better part of the first day. My man Running Deer, who had grown up watching his father repair everything from rifle stocks to lodge poles, pulled the old axle, mortised the crack, fitted a band of iron he had heating in the forge we'd brought from the agency metalworks, and had her wagon sound again by late afternoon. Margaret Linden spent that day sitting on the ground near the wagon, not hovering over Running Deer, not questioning him, just present. She watched the way a person watches when they are actually trying to understand what they're seeing, not just passing time. When Running Deer set down a tool to flex his hands, she passed it back to him without being asked. He noticed. He told me that evening that she had good sense for a wasaku, which, from Running Deer, is not a small thing. The mule's leg needed 2 days of hot soaking and rest. Margaret made no complaint about this. She spent the first evening writing in a small notebook by the fire of the wagon, and I watched from across the camp and did not go over. On the second morning she was helping one of my women, a widow named Bright Shawl, hang strips of meat to dry. Bright Shawl had more English than she let on around most white people, but she had decided to use it with Margaret, which told me something about Margaret. They were working steadily when I passed, and Margaret looked up and nodded and went back to the work. She had found an apron somewhere and put it on. The practical quality of the gesture, the simple decision to make herself useful, stayed with me. That evening I walked over and asked if I could sit. She looked up from her notebook. She said yes. I sat across from her, on the other side of the small fire she'd built. For a while neither of us said anything. I have spent enough of my life in silence to know that most people fill it because they're afraid of it. Margaret was not afraid of it. She sat and wrote a few more lines, and then she closed the notebook and set it in her lap. She asked me how long I had been chief of my band. I said 14 years. She asked if it was what I had expected it to be. I said that was an odd question. She said she supposed it was, but she was curious. I looked at the fire for a moment. I said that when I was young I expected it to mean something cleaner than it did. I said that leading people means being the one who absorbs the things there is no good answer to, so the rest of them don't have to carry quite as much of it. I said it was not glamorous. I said the most important thing I did last week was mediate a dispute over a horse that 2 families had each convinced themselves they owned. I said that did not feel like the life I had imagined for myself at 20. She smiled then. It was the first time I had seen her smile. It changed her face in a way I hadn't anticipated. She said she had been sent west by a medical society in Philadelphia when she was 22, because they needed someone to carry supplies on their wagon routes, and she had nursing training and no family tying her east, and she had been told it would be meaningful work, and she would see the frontier and it would be an adventure. I said, and was it? She said it was mostly mud and logistics, but she liked it. She had decided she liked it about a month in, and the liking had never really left her, which she hadn't expected. I said what had she expected? She said she didn't know, that she'd never really been asked to think about it. You were told what your life would look like when you were a girl, she said. You were told what kind of man you would marry and what kind of house you would live in and what you would do in it. And she said she had listened to all of that, and then the moment she had the chance to be somewhere no one was telling her what to do, she had taken it. And now she had been out west for 12 years and she didn't regret a day of it. I asked if she missed Philadelphia. She said some things, her sister, the library. I said, was there no man who had tried to bring her back? She said one or two had tried. She said they always assumed she needed to be told what she wanted, same as the people she had grown up around. She said not one of them had ever actually asked. I did not say anything to that. I sat with it. After a while she looked at me with those gray eyes and said that I was very quiet. I said I was thinking. She said about what? I said about what she just said, about the asking. She said most men don't find it very interesting. I said I found it very interesting. I said I had a question for her if she was willing. She tilted her head slightly and said all right. I said what did she want? Not from the wagon route, not from the supplies, not from the camp, from her life. What was it she wanted? She looked at me, just looked at me, for long enough that I was aware of the fire crackling between us and the sound of horses shifting their weight somewhere behind me and the moths moving in the dark around the fire. She said no one had ever asked her that. I said I know. I said that's why I'm asking, and I told her I was in no hurry for the answer. She didn't say anything for a while. I didn't push. I sat and let her think. The fire burned down a little and I put another piece of wood on it without getting up, just reached over and it caught and the light shifted. She said she wanted to be somewhere she was useful. She wanted to do work that had weight to it. She said she wanted someone to talk to, not to be talked at, but to talk to. She said she supposed she wanted to be somewhere she did not have to explain herself. She stopped and thought and said she wanted to wake up in the morning and feel like the day ahead of her was hers to shape. She stopped. She said she felt foolish. I said she should not. I said those were not small things. I said she had just told me more about herself in 2 minutes than most people tell anyone in a year, and she had done it honestly, without dressing it up. She looked at me for a long moment, then she said quietly, "Who are you?" I said I was Charging Hawk, Oglala Lakota, chief of my band, widower, man who drank too much coffee when he could get it, and who had not had a conversation like this one in longer than he could clearly remember. She almost laughed. It wasn't quite a laugh, more like the sound a person makes when something surprises them pleasantly. She said that she had not expected this. I said that made 2 of us. She left on the morning of the 4th day, when the mule's leg was sound and the road south was dry and clear. I helped her hitch the mule. We worked side by side in the early light, her fastening the traces on her side, me on mine, the mule standing patient, and the camp quiet behind us. It was the kind of morning that is cold in the shadows and warm the moment you step into the sun, and there was a smell of sage somewhere close. When it was done, she stood at the mule's head and looked at me. She said she didn't know how to thank me. She said that wasn't usually a problem for her. I said she'd helped Bright Shaw with 3 days of work and running deer with the repair, and she had nothing to thank me for. She said that wasn't what she meant. I said I know. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at me. She said she was going to be back through this country in about 6 weeks. She said the supply route ran 2 directions. I said I knew the route. She said she would be coming back through. I said I heard her. She looked at me straight and said she was wondering whether I would be somewhere she could find me. I said that I moved the camp with the season, but that there was a creek bed 2 hours south of the Standing Rock Cutoff, cottonwoods on the east bank, that I came to reliably in the late summer, that if she was going south in 6 weeks, she would pass within an hour of it. She said she supposed she might stop. I said I supposed I might be there. She stood a moment longer. Then she crossed the distance between us and put her hand on my arm, just her hand, flat on my forearm, and she left it there and looked up at me. Gray eyes in the morning light. I could feel the warmth of her through my sleeve. She said, "Thank you for asking." I did not say "you're welcome" because it wasn't enough. I put my hand over hers and held it a moment, and I said I wanted to know. I told her that was the truth of it. I had wanted to know who she was. She nodded once, like that settled something. Then she climbed up onto the wagon seat and took the reins, and the mule moved out of the camp and down the slope toward the southern road, and I watched her go until the wagon was just a shape in the sage. Yellow Fox appeared at my shoulder. He said nothing. I said without turning, "Don't." He said he wasn't going to say anything. I said, "Good." He stood there another moment and then said, very quietly, that she had looked back twice. I said I had noticed that. He walked away. She came back in 7 weeks, not 6. It was an afternoon with a flat white sky, the kind that promises rain before evening. I was sitting outside my lodge doing nothing in particular. I do not often have nothing in particular to do, but that afternoon I did, and I heard the wagon before I saw it. There is a sound a mule makes on dry ground, a particular rhythm to the way its hooves fall, and I knew that rhythm. She came down the east side of the creek bed, through the cottonwoods, and stopped the wagon at a reasonable distance and got down and walked toward the camp on foot, which was the right thing to do, and she had known it without being told. I stood up. She crossed to where I was standing, and she stopped about 6 feet from me, and she said, "I've been thinking about what I said, about what I wanted." I waited. She said she thought she might have left something out. I said, "I'm listening." She said she thought she wanted someone who asked. Just that. Someone who was curious about who she was, who wanted to know the answer, and who was willing to wait for it. She looked at me steadily. No softening. No performance. Just Margaret Linden in the afternoon light, with her hair half out of its pins again, and her eyes direct and her hands still at her sides. I said I had been here since the cottonwoods were in full leaf. I said I had moved the camp 17 miles west and then back. I said I had been here. She understood what I meant. I knew by the way her breath shifted slightly, and by the way she looked at me, not startled, but landed, like a word she had been waiting to hear had finally arrived. I am 63 years old telling you this. I have told very few people, not because I am ashamed of any part of it, but because most people would not understand what was remarkable about it. They would say, "A man asked a woman what she wanted. What is remarkable about that?" What is remarkable is this. I had led men into council rooms where the words being said could end in war or peace, and I had kept my voice level and my face still and my mind working. I had sat with dying people and held the weight of what they needed me to be. I had done hard things. And standing there in the afternoon with the rain starting to come in from the west, asking that woman what she wanted and meaning it, and then waiting with my whole self for her answer, that took something. Not courage exactly, something quieter than courage. It took believing that her answer mattered, that she was a person whose answer was worth the wait. She knew that I believed that. I think that is the thing. You cannot fake what you believe. We sat outside as the rain came, because we had gotten ourselves under the awning of the wagon and neither of us wanted to move, and we talked until the light went. I asked her more questions. She answered. She asked me things about the band, about the treaty situation, about my father, about what I missed about the years before the agency system had tightened around us like a bad saddle. I told her. I did not soften it, and she did not flinch from it. At some point, Bright Shawl brought out a clay pot of broth and set it between us without comment and went back inside. I think Bright Shawl had understood before I had, which is not unusual. She was a sharp-minded woman. At some point it was full dark and the rain had steadied to a light, even fall. Margaret said she supposed she should make camp. She said she had a bedroll in the wagon. I said the ground would be wet. She said she'd slept on wet ground before. I said I had no doubt of that. She looked at me, I looked at her. I said, I want to ask you something. She said all right. I said would she stay? Not that night. I meant in the larger sense. I said I was not a young man, and I was not a simple man, and my life was not easy, and I was not going to tell her what that life would look like because I had learned something in the last 7 weeks about what it meant to ask instead of tell. But I told her that I wanted her there. I said she was the most honest person I had encountered in a very long time, and I did not want her to drive that wagon south and come back in 6 weeks, and for us to do this in installments for the rest of our lives. I said I was old enough to know how much time I had already used. She didn't answer right away. I waited. The rain came down, the horses were quiet. Somewhere in the camp, a child was crying briefly and then stopped. She said, "You know what will be said." I said I knew. She said, "By your people and mine." I said yes. She said, "And you're asking anyway." I said I was asking because I wanted to know what she wanted, not what the world would permit or what was convenient or what made sense. What she, Margaret Linden, wanted, and I would wait as long as she needed. She was quiet for a long time. The fire inside the wagon cover threw a little light. Then she reached out and found my hand in the dark. Just found it the way she had found it the first morning, direct, no hesitation, no ceremony. Her hand was cold from the rain. I closed my hand around it. She said, "I want to stay." I said, "All right." She said, "I mean I want to stay." I said I understood her. She turned to look at me then with the rain coming down and the fire behind her, and she said quietly, "Nobody ever waited before. They just decided." I said I know. I said that is the trouble with deciding. You get the answer you've already made up, not the true one. She held my hand in both of hers. She was looking at me in a way that I felt in the center of my chest. Not sentimental, not fragile. The look of a person who has found something real and is naming it clearly to themselves. I am not a man given to believing in signs or in the convenience of the world. I have seen too much of what the world actually is. But I will tell you that it stopped raining at that moment. Just stopped, the way rain sometimes does, cleanly, as if it had finished a task. That was 26 years ago. She is inside right now. I can hear her moving around. The stove makes a particular sound when she opens it, a soft scrape of iron on iron, and she opened it twice while I was sitting here thinking about how to tell this to you. We have a son. He is 22, which seems impossible. He is built like my father and has his mother's eyes and her way of sitting very still when he is deciding something important, and her habit of asking questions that make a person feel genuinely considered. The life we made was not a smooth one. I will not tell you it was simple. The world pushed on it from many directions, the way the world does when it does not understand a thing and decides, therefore, that the thing is wrong. We had years that were hard in ways I won't detail here. She never once asked me to make it easier. I never once suggested that she should. What I know is this. I picked up my father's pipe that morning 26 years ago and put it back down without understanding why I had picked it up. I know now what I was doing. I was restless in a way I had no name for. A man can be alone so long he forgets he made a choice to be. He thinks it's just the shape of things. It is not always the shape of things. My father used to say that the hardest thing a man can do is hold his tongue and open his ears at the same time. He was talking about counsel, about diplomacy, about not letting your own certainty crowd out the truth. but I think he knew it applied to everything, to the whole life, to every person who comes into it. I asked her what she wanted. I meant it. She knew I meant it. That is the whole story, and it's enough. The stove just opened again. She will have made coffee because she knows I've been sitting out here thinking, and when I sit out here thinking for a long stretch, she always makes coffee. She has never once said so. She just makes it. I am going inside now.